The crowd held its breath as the champion's arm tightened around the girl's neck and her small body went limp under the bright lights. But this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning, and it had started months before in a quiet gym on the south side of the city where the walls were cracked and the paint peeled and the ropes of the ring smelled of sweat and soap and old wood, where a young African-American girl named Imani trained every morning with her coach June, who always said heartbeats, fear, and joy fuels work, and keep your head high even when your body feels low. Imani was small for her age, but she was fast and full of fight, and she carried inside her pocket a card she had written herself with 3 words. In bold letters, "You belong," and whenever doubt tried to creep in, whenever she felt too weak or too little, she touched the card and felt strong again. Her best friend Leo came after school to hold the pads for her, cheering when she hit hard, and cheering even louder when she missed, because he said every miss is a step closer to a hit, and he made up little sayings so she could remember the moves he would say. Your jab is a light, it makes your foe blink. Your cross is a ladder, it helps you climb over trouble. Your hook is a door, it swings wide and lets you in. And Imani laughed, but she learned, and each laugh made her work harder. And her grandma brought soup and warm bread to the gym and told her, "Child, you must eat well if you want to fight well, and you must pray if you want to stand tall with a kind heart." And Imani nodded and hugged her close across the nation. The name Cole filled stadiums. He was a white American champion, praised for his power, his shine, his cold focus. In the ring, he moved like a storm wave that lifted boats, then crushed them. He spoke on screens about grit and pain. He said, "Pain is a tax we all must pay to grow." He said, "I fear nothing, I own this ring." Imani watched him after training. She studied his feet, his eyes, the way he set traps, not with hate but with hope. She wanted to learn, not copy. June told her, "Take lessons, leave pride at the door," and she did. She breathed slow and steady and tried to follow each word. One day a poster appeared in the gym, its corners taped to the wall, calling for a youth tournament with many rounds and a prize that made Imani's chest pound. The winners would go to a pro camp to train with champions and learn from the best. The finals were 5 months away. Her heart thumped as she read the date. June saw her face and asked, "Do you want to join?" And Imani said yes without fear. June drew a plan on the board. She wrote weeks and days, she wrote food and sleep, she wrote skills and rest, and she drew a star on the last day and said, "On that day you will stand tall." Leo pumped his fist and shouted, "We can do it." Grandma clapped once and said, "We will be wise and brave." So they began to work harder than ever. Imani woke at dawn to jump rope until her legs burned. Then she shadowboxed in the mirror, then hit the bag with rhythm, learning to slip and roll, to frame her guard, to tap early when a hold grew tight. June reminded her, tapping is smart. Tapping keeps you safe so you can keep your dream. And Imani believed her. The first round of the tour was in a school gym, the floor waxed and shining, the air full of popcorn, the lights buzzing like bees. She wrapped her hands and tied her pink shoes tight, then climbed into the ring. Her foe was taller, with calm eyes and blue gloves. The bell rang. Imani moved her feet. She kept her guard high. She threw her jab like a light, tapping her foe's face again and again until the taller girl blinked. She aimed a right to the body. The crowd gasped. She slid left, not rushing, not chasing. She counted a beat, then stepped in again. By the end, the judges gave her the win, and she bowed. Her foe nodded with a small smile, and Imani's chest glowed with joy. The second round was harder. Her foe snapped a jab to her nose. Her eyes watered. She blinked and circled away, but the other girl chased and dug to her ribs. Imani gasped. June shouted, "Frames." She lifted her forearms and made a wall. The next punch slid off. She stepped away and breathed. She touched her card in her mind, "You belong," and with fire in her chest, she jabbed again, hooked 3 times and landed clean. The bell rang. The judges raised her hand again. She hugged June and Leo. They laughed and clapped. The tour pressed on. Imani ate eggs and rice, drank water. Grandma made stew on Sundays. They told stories of old fights and roots. Grew deep until a letter came to the gym with a seal and a stamp inviting the winners to the camp where Cole would be on the last day for a teaching demo. And maybe a test under the eyes of the ref. Grandma read it twice and said, "This is big." June smiled and said, "This is a chance to learn." Leo shouted, "You will meet him at last." Imani's heart drummed like thunder. She held her card and whispered, I'm still here." They traveled by van through gray roads and fields. Imani counted trees to calm her mind. When they reached the camp, she saw a wall of photos of champions, smiling and scarred, holding belts and flags. In the center was Cole in a white robe, his belt on his shoulder, shining like fire. He looked like a statue of light. June touched her shoulder and said, "Look and learn, then look ahead." And Imani nodded. The camp was full of drills. They moved in lines, turned hips, kept eyes open. Even when hit, they floated on the floor. Watched the chest, not the hands. Felt the weight shifts. Her body ached, but her mind grew. She ate with kids from many places, trading snacks, telling stories. One boy had slept in a car. One girl worked at a diner. They all carried scars, but also hope. June whispered to her one night, "Remember, Imani, no fight is won alone." And she nodded, thinking of Leo's laughter and Grandma's prayers. On the last day, the stands filled, the lights hot, the music loud. Cole walked in simple shirt, no belt, no crown, smiling, waving. He told the crowd, "This is about safety and respect." He touched gloves with Imani and they began to dance, teaching as they moved. He whispered, "See the shoulder, hear the breath, feel the weight." She felt joy, she felt seen. The crowd cheered her tries. Then in a flash she fainted, slipped to her back, wrapped her neck. The hold meant to teach turned too tight, too fast. The ref shouted, "Release." Imani's hand rose too late. The lights spun, the floor blurred, her knees bent. The girl who dreamed of being champion fell into darkness in front of the world. Gasps filled the air as Imani's body fell, and the referee rushed forward, waving his arms and calling for a stop, while the crowd that had been cheering only seconds earlier went silent. And June and Leo and Grandma ran down from the stands with fear in their eyes. The medics moved, quickly pushing through with gloves and water bottles and bags, and one knelt at Imani's side, pressing a hand to her neck while another lifted her legs. As Cole, the champion, dropped to his knees, his face pale and his hands shaking, saying, "I am sorry. I did not mean this. I meant no harm. I lost my control." And his voice cracked like a boy who had lost his way. And the referee told him step back, but he stayed close, his eyes locked on the still body of the girl who had dared to stand before him. The crowd whispered, some angry, some worried, some praying, and June leaned close to Imani, whispering, "Child, you are safe. Stay with us. Please stay with us." And Grandma pressed her hands together and prayed out loud words of hope and light, while Leo stood frozen, his fists clenched, helpless, until he cried out, "Please wake up. You are stronger than this. You are not done yet." And then a soft sound rose from Imani's lips, a faint breath that said, "I am here." Though so soft that only June heard it, but it was enough, and the medics lifted her carefully and carried her out, while the crowd clapped, not for the champion, not for the match, but for the girl who had shown courage against a storm. Later that night, in the quiet of the camp room, Imani lay in bed, her face pale, her breath steady. June sat by her side, holding her hand, whispering, "You fought well. You scared us, but you fought well." Leo sat on the floor, telling silly stories about when they were kids, and she once tried to box with socks on her hands and fell on her face. And Grandma prayed by the window, her words flowing like a song that filled the small room with peace. When Imani finally stirred hours later, her first words were not of pain but of fire. She asked, "When is the next fight?" June wiped her tears and laughed, saying, "First you must rest, then you can rise. But yes, the tour is not over. You still have your place." And Leo clapped his hands, saying, "I told you nothing could stop you." And Grandma smiled, saying, "The Lord has given you more time. Use it well." And from that day, Imani trained again, slower at first, wiser, each drill done with care, each breath measured, her body healing, her heart growing, her mind sharper. She remembered the choke, the darkness, the feeling of almost losing herself, and she promised she would rise stronger, not only for herself, but for every child told they were too small, too weak, too late. She ran in the mornings when the sun rose. She hit the bag with steady rhythm. She worked on her guard, on her balance, on her patience. June reminded her, fight, smart, fight with purpose. Leo shouted from the corner, "You are lightning, you are fire," and Grandma packed her stew whispering, "Fight with love, fight with faith." Sometimes at night Imani would sit alone in the gym staring at the ropes, remembering how they had looked from the ground when her vision dimmed, and she whispered to herself, "Never again, never again." The youth tournament pressed forward, and round after round Imani climbed higher, her speed faster, her strength deeper, her courage unshaken. The crowd began to notice the girl with the pink shoes, the girl who bowed after every match, the girl who carried herself with respect, and by the time the finals were announced, her name was on every board. Imani, the smallest, the youngest, the one who had faced the champion and returned still standing. The grand final was set in a city stadium larger than anything she had ever seen, lights brighter than day screens, the size of houses, crowds filling every seat, chanting names and waving banners, the air buzzing with music and the smell of fried food and sweet drinks, the announcer's voice booming with every match. The winner of this last bout would not only hold the youth belt, but also earn the right to step toward the pro league and maybe one day stand again with champions. When her name was called, she walked down the ramp, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest, the roar of the people filling her ears until it was almost too much. Her card was in her pocket, her pink shoes tied tight, her body tired but her spirit burning. She touched the ropes, whispered, "You belong," and stepped inside the ring. Across from her stood a tall girl, lean and fierce, her eyes sharp, her gloves tight, her body twitching with the hunger to win. She was known in the circuit as a breaker of spirits and had beaten bigger opponents before. The crowd loved her but also feared her, the kind of fighter who showed no mercy, the kind of fighter who looked into your eyes and saw doubt, the kind who fed on weakness. The referee called them to the center, gave the rules: keep it clean, keep it fair, listen to my commands. Then the bell rang and the fight began. The tall girl snapped jabs into Imani's face, quick and sharp like sparks. Imani's head jerked back, her nose stung, her eyes watered, but she kept her guard high. She moved her feet, circling, keeping space. She threw her jab back, not hard, but steady, tapping like light touches, a rhythm to break the storm. She ducked under a hook, she rolled away from a cross. She remembered Cole's words: see the shoulder, hear the breath, feel the weight, and she used them not as fear but as wisdom. Each time her foe's shoulder twitched, she knew where the fist was going. Each time she heard the hiss of breath, she knew what came next. Each time the weight shifted, she felt it under her own feet and answered. The crowd cheered, "Imani, Imani, Imani." Each sound a drum in her chest. But the fight was far from easy because the tall girl pressed forward like a machine, her punches flowing, her steps heavy, her eyes never leaving Imani. The first round ended with sweat already dripping off both girls, and the judges wrote close scores. The second round began, and the tall girl came harder this time, cutting the ring off, forcing Imani to the ropes. She slammed a right hand to her ribs and a hook to her temple. The stadium gasped. The referee stepped close, ready to end it. June screamed from the corner, "Show me you are still here," and Imani felt her legs shaking, but she lifted her gloves and shouted with fire, "I am still here." Her voice carried through the arena, and the crowd erupted. She ducked under the next punch, stepped off the ropes, jabbed back 1-2, then a hook to the ribs. The bell rang, saving her from more. She staggered back to her corner, her chest burning, her arms heavy. Leo waved a towel, fanning her, shouting, "You got her, she is slowing, I see it." Grandma cupped her hands and yelled, "Fight with faith, child, fight with faith." And June pressed ice on her neck, whispering, "Listen, breathe. She is only human. You are here because you belong." Round 3 started, and Imani felt the weight of her body. But she also felt the weight of her dream. She used the ring smarter, this time circling faster, popping the jab not to hurt, but to guide, and each jab landed made the tall girl angrier. She swung wild hooks, trying to crush her, but those hooks left openings and Imani slipped under them, countering to the ribs. Once, twice, 3 times the crowd roared. The tall girl hissed and charged harder, but now Imani saw more. She saw the shoulder dip too far. She saw the eyes blink too quick. She saw the feet stomp too heavy. She read the story of her foe and wrote her answer with her fists. By the end of round 3, The judges leaned forward taking notes. Sweat poured down both faces. The crowd louder than ever, chanting like thunder in round 4. It became a war of wills, both girls exhausted, both trading shots like hammers, leather cracking against guards' ribs and arms. Both refusing to step back, the sound of fists echoing like thunder against a wall. Imani landed a hook that shook the tall girl's head back. The crowd leapt. The tall girl answered with a flurry of punches that slammed into Imani's guard until her shoulders screamed, but she refused to break. She thought of the choke. She thought of the darkness. She thought of the time her body went limp, and the crowd gasped, and she told herself, if I could rise from that, I can rise from this. She bit down on her mouthguard, stepped forward into the storm, throwing punches back. The bell rang again, saving them both from collapse. And the crowd stood clapping and stomping on the floor. Round 5, the final round. Both fighters stood barely on their legs, their faces bruised, their gloves heavy. The announcer shouted, last round. The crowd deafening, banners waving, horns blaring. The referee looked them both in the eye and asked, are you ready? And both nodded, though their bodies screamed no. Imani whispered to herself, one last time, you belong. Then she stepped forward, jabbed, hooked, crossed her foe, answered with bombs, both hitting, both hurting, both refusing to fall. The noise rising higher and higher, and in the last 30 seconds she felt something deep inside, a fire that came from Grandma's prayers, from June's chalkboard, from Leo's laughter, from every dawn run, every drop of sweat, every moment of fear she had survived. She slipped. A jab through a right hand, then a hook, then another. Her foe staggered but did not fall. They fought until the last bell rang, the sound echoing as they leaned against each other, too tired to stand alone. The referee stepped between them, both still on their feet, both still alive, both champions of spirit. The bell rang and silence rolled over the crowd like a wave, crashing, then pulling back, because everyone in the stadium knew the fight was close, too close to call. Both girls had given everything, both had landed blows, both had stood tall when their bodies wanted to fall. The referee stepped in between them, took one wrist in each of his hands, his face firm, but his eyes showing respect. He looked at the judges, who were still writing, still counting, still thinking, every mark of the pen sounding louder than the roar that had filled the air just seconds before. The announcer held the microphone tight, his other hand pressed to his ear, listening for the scores. The cameras zoomed close on the faces of the fighters, the crowd holding its breath. The smell of sweat heavy in the ring. Imani closed her eyes for a moment and saw not the tall girl in front of her, but June standing by the chalkboard with her hand on a star. She saw Leo clapping and cheering with silly rhymes. She saw Grandma standing over a pot of stew, whispering faith into the steam. She whispered to herself, you belong. She opened her eyes, lifted her chin, even as her legs trembled. The referee raised both girls' arms, waiting. The announcer's voice boomed, judge number 1 scores the bout for the red corner. The crowd gasped a roar from one side. Judge number 2 scores the bout for the blue corner. The other side roared, judge number 3 scores the bout, and the winner by split decision is Imani. For half a second there was silence, as if the whole stadium needed time to understand the name. Then the sound came like thunder rolling through the sky. The crowd erupted, waving banners, stomping feet, clapping until the ground itself seemed to shake. Children on shoulders chanting her name, Imani, Imani. She dropped to her knees, her gloves still on her chest, heaving her eyes wide with disbelief. The referee lifted her hand high, the youth belt carried in by officials, polished gold, bright as the sun under the lights. When they wrapped it around her waist, she almost fell again, not from a punch but from the weight of a dream made real. Her foe bowed low, showing respect, and Imani bowed back, whispering thank you for the fight. Then she turned and saw June leaping into the ring, tears pouring down her face, not of sorrow but of pride. June hugged her tight, whispering, you did it. You showed them who you are. You showed the whole world. Leo jumped up and down, banging the side railing, shouting, that is my sister, that is my champion. He shouted until his throat gave out, his voice cracking, but his eyes shining with joy. Grandma stood in the crowd, her hands raised, her head tilted back, her lips moving in prayer. Thank you, Lord, for carrying This child, thank you for turning her shadow to light. Thank you for making her strong. The cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward, their voices calling questions, but Imani heard none of it. She only heard the sound of her own heart. She felt the card in her pocket, and the words that had followed her since the start, you belong. Her lips moved, trembling but steady as she whispered, I belong. Tears streaking down her cheeks, the crowd chanting her name again and again, the stadium alive with fire and joy, the announcer shouting, she is the youngest champion in this ring. And the sound that followed was thunderous, like the world itself declaring her name. But the story did not end with the belt around her waist or the roar of the crowd, for as the chants of her name rolled like thunder, another sound began to stir, a softer sound, a rising murmur spreading through the crowd like ripples on waterheads. Turned bodies, shifted fingers pointed toward the stage, because a tall figure was walking down the steps. Not with a robe, not with a crown, not with a belt gleaming on his shoulder, but in plain clothes and humble steps. It was Cole, the champion, the man whose shadow had stretched across her dream, the man whose arm had once tightened around her neck until the light faded, the man whose name had filled arenas for years now, walking toward her, not as a king but as a man. The crowd fell quiet. The drums stopped, the chants softened, only whispers. Now the referee turned his head, the announcer held his breath. June froze, gripping the ropes. Leo's mouth hung open. Grandma pressed her hands together, whispering a prayer as Cole climbed the steps and slipped through the ropes into the ring. He stood before her, tall, broad, powerful, but his head bowed, his hands open, as if to say, I come not to rule, but to honor. He looked into her eyes, his voice steady though heavy. Imani, you have the heart of a true fighter. I lost control once, and I hurt you. I will never forget that. But you turned pain into power. You reminded me what this sport is meant to be. You reminded me why we fight. His words carried across the stadium, the crowd silent, then swelling with emotion. Imani looked back at him, her chest rising and falling, her eyes tired but blazing with truth. She saw no pride in his face, only honesty, only humility. She nodded, and in front of the world, Cole took her hand, lifted it higher than before, and shouted, this is the future, this is the spirit, this is the champion. The crowd erupted like a storm, the noise shaking the air, louder than any fight. Cheers, tears, strangers hugging, flags waving, drums pounding, the chant of her name surging again and again. Imani, Imani. Imani. She lifted the belt in her other hand, her knees weak but her spirit unbreakable. She shouted, I am still here, and the sound came back like a crashing wave, filling every corner of the arena with light. Reporters rushed the ring, their voices flying, questions. What do you feel? What do you want to say? What is next? But she only gave simple words. I fight for love, I fight for hope, I fight so no child feels they do not belong. Those words carried farther than the lights of the stadium, farther than the roar of the night. They reached homes and schools and gyms. Children who sat watching touched their own hearts, whispered the same words, I belong, as June hugged her, whispering, I am proud of you, not only for the win, but for your heart. As Leo wrapped his arms around her, crying, you lit up the whole world. As Grandma kissed her forehead, saying, child, you turned darkness into light and gave us courage. And when the lights dimmed, when the reporters left, when the crowd faded into the night, Imani sat alone with the belt across her lap, her gloves beside her, the card still in her pocket. She pulled it out, touched the letters, read them aloud. You belong. And she whispered, to the quiet room, I belong, I always will. And she knew her fight was only beginning, the road ahead long and hard. But her spirit could not break, because champions are not born. They are made in fire, in fear, in faith, and in love. And she was ready to carry that truth wherever her path would go. And so the story of Imani, the girl who fell into darkness but rose brighter than ever, comes to its close. She proved to every heart watching that no matter how strong the hold, no matter how heavy the fall, no matter how dark the night, there is always a reason to rise again. Her courage, her faith, her love, and her fight remind us that true champions are not only crowned in the ring, but also in the heart. If you felt inspired by her journey, remember to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that lift the spirit and remind us all that we belong.